Good. So I'm going to try to stay with a normal voice for an hour and a half. And I think I will cancel tomorrow's class because I'm still not completely recovered, and I don't know if you hear it, but my voice is annoying me. So if I talk for an hour, it starts being difficult. Okay. So last time we talked about structural holes. We talked about different arguments for closed versus open structures. And so today, instead of going into the measurement part, which I do want to do, but I want to do this when we are in person there. So I'll do this next week. So what I do today is instead I go further theoretically talking about this. And so the underlying arguments of structural holes is partly that there's diversity that's related with Granovetter strength of Weierstrass, or that some people have more resources, more connections that are highly resourceful than others. So from a social capital perspective, we might actually want to include some characteristics of the nodes, not just structural, but also characteristics of the nodes in there. Oh, I see I need to add one more person. And so that's what we're going to do today. So I'm going to talk briefly about 3 different ways in which we can include attributes into sort of my ego network. So we're still looking at measures of position, but we started off with centrality measures. Then we went into structural holes arguments and open versus closed structures like Krakauer and so on. Here we're going to include attributes explicitly, so it's not a purely structural approach anymore. Okay, so we're going to look at 3 different versions: resourcefulness, homophily, and diversity. The first one is the most simple, but also maybe the most useful in most cases. And that's basically saying, well, if we have 5 friends, but they're all poor, like the situation on the left, maybe that's not as useful as being connected with just 3 people, but these are resourceful people. So, I mean, I'm talking here about money, but it could be anything that could be useful, like intellectual capital that your friends have, or some specific knowledge that they have. So it's the level to which they have something. And we can easily calculate this. We can take a network and we can focus on the different people in that network. So for example, if I focus on E is connected, and I'm looking at the outgoing ties. E is friends with 25, 32, and 19. But the I mean with this is, let's say this is the amount of money you make in a year, in thousands euros or something. Then you have one friend that makes 19,000 euros, one friend that makes 32,000, and one that makes 25,000 euros a year. So you can take the total. That means that you have among your friends, so the friends that you have, they in total have 76,000 euros. Of course, we're not counting egos per amount, because that's of course that's not a social capital argument, right? Here the same. If I would look at this person has 45,000, one friend that's 45,000, one friend that's 19,000, and that's it. So in total that's 64,000. Here this person has 45, 25, and 21, which gives me 91, and this person has just one connection, and that's 32,000. Yeah. Now I'm just using number of so the euros that they make in a year as a sort of example, but it could be anything in principle, right? So it could be other types of things. It doesn't have to be specifically money, it could be other resources, it could be, you know, how happy a person is. And if you think that happiness, the more happy the people around you are, the more that's a resourcefulness for you, a resource for you, then that could count as well. Now, I can also take the average, and there's an important difference between taking the total and the average. If I take the average, I will see that actually this person and this person, so this person and this person have the same values, the highest values, and this person has a low value. Here, this person has a high value. And the reason for that is it's a question about whether is it the sum of the resources of the others that you want to look at, or is it the average resources of others? So if you think about it, if you think about, let's say this is some measure of how smart a person is or something like that. Is it that the more friends you have that are smart, the better? Or is it that the average smartness of your friends is important for you? So these are two different ways in which things can be used. Yeah. Generally, when you talk about resourcefulness, it's something where there is a value of 0 at the bottom. Yeah, so you have 0 units of something, you have more and more and more. Yeah. And the more your friends have, the better it is for you, on average or in total. Is that okay? I can't see anyone, so I'm going to assume that everything is okay. And if not, you tell me, okay? Good. So that's a very simple version. It's very simple because it's just taking the resourcefulness of the others into account. So it's not the degree of a node, but it's the degree weighted by the resourcefulness of these others that they're connected with. Okay. A second approach to include attributes is to look at homophily. And so here the argument is that, well, now I'm going to look at something like political views or things like that. Remember the balance theory, the general balance theory argument? Well, it's not that if someone else is different from you, that's actually a negative thing necessarily. Could be, but it could also be a good thing. So here's an example where maybe this person and the other people share the same ideas. Here's a person that shares different, that has different ideas from the other people. Yeah. So this person here has different ideas than the others. Here, this person has similar ideas to the other. Which one would be better and why would it be better? That's my question to you. So I know you're hiding, but I'm still going to assume that you're going to write something or tell me something. So it could be in either case. So if you think this is a good situation or this is a bad situation, tell me why. If you think this is a good situation or a bad situation, just tell me why. There are no wrong answers. Well, I always say that, and then I say, well, but maybe. So why would it be good to be connected with people that are similar to yourself?
I mean, this depends on exactly what we want to analyze. So what kind of objective we have. If we have a certain interest and we're connected with people of the same interest, then it would make sense to stay with them together, because information or whatever, even in the trade of goods, things could maybe flow more faster or more efficient. However, in the other case, this would be not so productive. Nevertheless, in the other case of diversity, if people have different opinions, then you could be more prone not to end up in a certain bubble, like a filter bubble, but being maybe more impactful if you want to convince other people.
And how would you be more impactful?
I mean, if you have an opinion or an attitude you want to spread, or maybe just an information, a mere information, maybe people that are more similar to you are already more likely to receive that information or maybe have it. But if there are people who are different, you might be more productive in the sense that you would bring the information to people that don't have the information or that don't have the opinion yet you want to spread, whether it's good or bad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'm also looking at Camilla, sorry. So on the one hand, being in this situation is easy because all the people you're connected with have the same views, have the same ideas. So think about it as, you know, if you're a sociologist or you're a data scientist and all the people around you are also sociologists or data scientists, it's easy to talk with them because you have the same basic starting point to talk with. If they're not a sociologist and you're a sociologist, it's a lot more difficult because you're like, oh, I have to explain Durkheim and, you know, the basic things to really be able to discuss something. Or, you know, inequality, what is this inequality? Well, you know, there's sort of things. Or in data science, you know, some ideas that are core to data science, if you talk with sociologists, maybe sometimes that might not work that easy. Or with someone that's you know, is a natural scientist or something like that. So on the one hand, it's easier to talk with people that have the same basis on which to build. It could also be related with characteristics like you know, you have the same experiences and backgrounds. It's easier to talk. It feels also more that you have an emotional connection with that person. Yeah. So if your parents separated and my parents separated, it's easier to talk maybe together about this than if your parents separated and my parents didn't separate. So there could be the similarity might generate emotional connection, it might generate understanding, it might be a basis for understanding. So yes, there's a few things there that could be useful here. Yeah. So easier to maintain the relationship as well. So on the other hand, and I think this is where both of you are sort of referring to a bit, is if you connect with people that are different from yourself, that might be useful because what actually happens is you're being exposed to different views. And that might help you to build better views, to be more critical about yourself. So, you know, if I believe that the world is this way and I think it's flat, if I'm surrounded by people that, you know, are not believing that it's flat, maybe that's better because maybe we can come up with a solution why my view is right or your view is right. And, you know, we can discuss things. So there's more things to discuss. If I'm different from you, so for example, I'm a sociologist, you're a data scientist, that might be helpful because it actually means I can learn something from you that if you're a sociologist and I'm a sociologist, we don't have. Because, you know, it's very nice, it's very cozy to be sociologists among each other, but maybe we are not learning as much as if we would be exposed to things that are different to ourselves. And I think that's what Timon, I think you were saying, right? As well as, sorry, I am trying to read the names, but I'm not completely sure if Danis, I think it is. It's very far away because I have my you in the back screen there. Camilla, did you want to say something?
Yeah, just a question, like in the second example, is it so that all the people in the outer circle, they have the same opinion, so they are a part of the same group, or is it like more this diversity that also our colleague talked about in the chat? Or
so That's an interesting part. At this point here, I'm just focusing on ego and alter, and it's like a combination of ego with alter. So it's really ego and the alters. If you think about diversity among the alters, that's actually the third hypothesis that we're going to look at, or the third stream of research. Yeah. So I'm actually going to come back to this point in a bit. So let's just look at homophily here first. Yeah. So the idea is, if you connect with other people that are similar to yourself, more cozy, more easy, maybe more trust that's built, easier to talk with, sort of, the basis is there for a relationship. But maybe it's boring, maybe it's not creating more things. So if you think about creativity is generally better if the other person is different from yourself. Yeah, heterophily, basically. Homophily is better for security, feeling good, these sort of things. I'm simplifying it quite a bit, but that's sort of the idea. So exposed to new ideas. So if you're Donald Trump supporter, being surrounded by other people that are not Donald Trump supporter, it might be good for you, in the long run, but maybe you prefer to be surrounded by other Donald Trump supporters because it's nicer. If all the others are also saying that, those elections were stolen. So two different things, two different benefits, disadvantages. Okay, so that's homophily. So let's look at some measures. How can we do this? So the first thing we could do is just calculate. If we think about a binary situation, male, female, very simple situation. We could just calculate the percentage of homophilous ties. So we take ego. So blue is male and red is female here. So we take ego. This is a male. How about what percentage of ego's connections are the same as ego? So in other words, what percentages of the connections are male? That's very simple, right? That's 80%, right? 4 out of 5. 4 out of 5, the others are homophily. That's the percentage of homophily, 80%. How much is it here? So now it's a female. Aha. So we count this as homophily. So there's 2 homophilous ties and 3 non-homophilous ties. So that gives us 40%, right? And here, that's a male surrounded by 3 males and 2 females. So that's 3 out of 5, which is 60%. Is that okay? I think that's quite clear. So if I would think whether some people are biased, so they have a preference to choose their own kind. Yeah, they have a preference to choose their own gender. Which one would you say has the highest tendency, this highest bias to do this? So imagine that, you're in an organization and you're looking at these 3 people and you're like, okay, which of these people is the most biased in selecting, in hanging out with their own rather than with other? So I have Alberto saying A. And why is that? It's because 80% of this person has 80% homophilous ties, right? This person only has 40%. This person has 40%, 60%. Oh, okay, sorry. That's good. That's good to know. Yes. Thank you for letting me know. I try to keep a watch on who's logging in, but sometimes it's yeah, I don't see it all. Okay, so that seems logical, right? Well, actually, yes, we could calculate this that way. And actually, so the other way of doing this, instead of doing 80%, 40%, 60%, one of the classic ways that's in social network analysis we've done things is to say, well, let's take the number of external ties minus the number of internal ties divided by the number of external plus internal. I'm just telling you this. It's the same as percentage homophily. It just reverse and then minus something. But basically what it does, it takes the number of heterophilous ties, external ties. So A has one external tie. A has 4 internal ties. So that's 1 minus 4. That's minus 3 divided by the total number of ties, which is 5. And so this is minus 0.6. This is 0.2, this is minus 1.2. What this is important for, it's because Krakauer, remember Krakauer, the one that last time was saying like, you know, Bert, you're wrong, Coleman, you're wrong. Well, this is exactly the same. He built this measure that's sort of like a bit complex, but it basically is a transformation of homophily, but the reverse, it's heterophily. So a high value, if you have a value of 1, it's heterophily. Why? If you have only external ties, let's say you have 5 external ties, no internal ties, 5 minus 0 divided by 5 plus 0, which is 1. So only external ties. If you have only internal ties, let's say you have 4 internal ties and no external ties, that's 0 minus 4 divided by 0 plus 4, which is now minus 1, yeah, because it's 0 minus 4 divided by 0 plus 4, which is minus 4 divided by 4. So this measure goes from minus 1 to 1. Minus 1 being homophily, because it's internal ties only. 1 being heterophily. Yeah, so I'm mentioning this because in some of the classic papers, the EI index are sort of used, even though it's sort of a really not so useful. I mean, it's sort of counterintuitive. It's easier to just say, okay, this is a percentage of homophilous. So we sort of agreed that this would be the person that probably is the most biased. This is the man that only wants to hang out with men and, you know, in the organization and doesn't hang out with women. But what if I told you that this is the organization? So we have A, B, and C here, but this is actually the organization. Are you now still thinking that actually there's a tendency towards homophily for A, and that B has a tendency for heterophily or a low tendency for homophily? It changes our perspective potentially. And why is that? Because we have now an idea about the possibility, the possible choices we could have made. And given the possible number of males that are there, actually A might not have made a lot of preference for choosing males. Maybe it's just random chance. You know, the fact that A has 4 ties to males and 1 to female, well, there are 30 males and 4 females. So by random chance, A could have chosen almost that. If I look at the female here, B is actually the one that, in this case, would be more have a tendency to choose their own kind, so to choose the same gender. Why? Well, if we take random chance, then B should have chosen more males and less females. B chose 2 females out of 3 possibilities. There are 4 females in total, but she's also one of the females, so there are 3 others. So B actually chose more females than random chance, given that she chose 5 people in total. So what we don't do if we take the homophily measure is we don't take into account the opportunity structure, the opportunity of choosing specific people. What we were doing here was saying, well, what if 50% of people are male and 50% of people are female, which is what we normally do because that's what the division is approximately in the world. But that doesn't mean that in the organization that's the case. And so the opportunity in this organization might be very different, or this could be a classroom. Is that sort of getting clear? So it might be misleading to just take the percentage and say, okay, this person is more homophilous. That's true. This person is more homophilous than this, but this person has a higher tendency to build the bias towards building ties to their own kind, because that's the bias implies that you need to take into account what the opportunities are. And so in this case, of course, I made this explicitly like this so that it's sort of clear. There were more opportunities for males to be chosen than females. And so this person is actually having a higher tendency to build, to have a bias towards building ties to females. So you could say that actually B has a preference above chance of choosing ties to other females, to their own gender, whereas A might not have above chance levels of preference to choose ties to males, to own kind. So I say own kind, it's maybe a bit worth a strong, wrong word, own gender. Is that okay? Well, if we take that into account, if we want to take into account the opportunities, we have to do we have to calculate a different measure. And what's this measure? Well, one possibility is to take Euler skew. What does it do? It's dividing the possible ties and non-possible ties. So sorry, the available ties, the ties that are there and the ones that are not there. And it considers also the people that are there, that have been chosen or that have not been chosen. So let me make this more concrete. So if A is a male, and we know that in this group, there are 13 males and 4 females. That's what we know. That's now our opportunity situation. Oh, since A is a male, it's actually, there's 12 males that A could choose, and there's 4 females that A could choose. Because I have to subtract the fact that A is also a male. It's one of the 13 males. So what I can do is, I can now say, okay, so there was a possibility to have 12 same ties, so homophilous ties, and there were a possibility for 4 heterophilous ties. Yeah. What actually happened is that A, and I'm sorry, this is A from this part here, that's not A here. So unfortunately, this is the default way of calculating, so it's like, so A is the number of connections to person that's the same gender. So there are 4 people that A is connected with that's the same gender. And there's 1 person that A is connected with that is this different gender. We already knew that because we calculated the homophilous. But what we didn't take into account is how many there are that they didn't connect with, that are the same and different. So there are actually 8 people, 8 males that A didn't choose. And there are 3 females that A didn't choose. Now we can already easily see that, okay, it's not completely balanced, but it's going in the direction. What can we do is we can actually calculate the Euler skew index, which is you multiply A with D, and you subtract from that B and C. And then you divide this by the sum of these 2 terms, so that it's nicely in between 2 extremes that are like -1 and 1, I think. Well, there's some exceptions, but so let me make this more concrete. What are we actually doing? We're saying this is consistent with homophily, right? Choosing, so if we think about homophily, it's choosing people that are similar to ourselves, that are the same to ourselves. So being connected with someone that's the same to ourselves, that's consistent with homophily, right? But not choosing people that are different from ourselves, that's also consistent with homophily. Because it's not only I choose people that are the same as me, but I also don't choose the people that are different from me. That's the opposite side of the same thing. So this is consistent with homophily, these 2 things. So the higher these values are, the more there's an indication of homophily. These 2 things here, they're inconsistent with homophily. Why? Choosing people that are different from ourselves, that's heterophily, that's anti-homophily. And not choosing people that are the same to ourselves is also anti-homophily. So the ideal situation in Euler's Q situation is that you would have high values here and low values here. So if I multiply this with this, so these two parts here, that's giving me this. And now I subtract from that the product of these two, which if these two values are low, gives me a low value, which gives me high Euler's Q. Homophily. If these two things are high, I'm sorry, I'm going over them again. If these two things are high, let me just, oops. Let me just do this with the laser pointer. If these two values are high, then I get a lot of this. And if these are low, relatively speaking, then I have few this. That gives me a negative value, which is an indication of heterophily. Yeah. So Euler's Q is a balance between choosing people that are the same and not choosing people that are different. The product of that versus choosing people that are different and not choosing people that are the same. If that's high, your Euler's Q reduces because you have this part, B and C. If this is high, that's A and D. So if you choose this and this a lot, if you have these two a lot, so you choose people that are the same, you don't choose people that are different, that's consistent with homophily. If you do a lot of these and not a lot of that, that's consistent with heterophily, and that will give you a negative value. And in principle, because this has to be a value and this has to be a value, let me see if this is 0, and this is a high value, then this becomes 0 plus that's high value, that becomes minus BC divided by BC, which is -1. If this is a high value and this is 0, then it becomes high value divided by high value, which becomes a +1. So we have -1 and 1 in principle as a sort of reference. Is that okay? So let's do this again. So this is actually the values we would get, and we get a 0.2. So there's actually a little bit of a tendency for A to choose males over females, a little bit, 0.2. Because choosing 4 out of 5 people as males is actually, if you know that there's 12 and there's 4, 4 and 1 is 4 out of 1, that's like 12 out of 4, that's just a little bit different. So you have a little bit of a tendency to build still ties to people. Here, we have 2 connections to the same and 10 connections, so not connecting to males. And that's what's really counting here. The fact that there's a lot of males that could have been chosen, a lot of opportunity, very few being chosen. This, very few being chosen that are male, a lot that are not chosen. So there's this sort of tendency towards homophily is to do with choosing 2 women out of 3, because there are 3, because B is also a woman, and not choosing a lot of males. That's why there's a high homophily here. These 2 combined, 2 times 10, minus 3 times 1, that's the heterophily part. 20 minus 3 divided by 23, that gives me 0.74. A high tendency towards homophily. Above chance. If I take the last one, there's actually a tendency away from homophily. Why? This is a male. You know that there is 12 other males and 4 females. That's, in principle, that would be 12 plus 4, that's 16. Yeah, that would be, well, whatever percentage that is. This percentage of female, the C has a tendency to build more ties to females than random chance. Given that you have 12 males you could have chosen and only 4 females. And you reflect that here, this and this is low. This is really high. You didn't connect with a lot of males that were available. And so this product becomes high, which gives us the BC one that's high. AD is low, so it gives me a negative value divided by sort of the sum of these things, which gives me minus 0.5. You know, this person has a tendency towards heterophily, above chance. Is that okay? So the story here is really that if you look at a person, you don't only have to take into account who they choose, but you also have to take into account what were the opportunities. If you don't do that, you just calculate a percentage homophilous. And you would say, oh, look, this woman, 40% homophilous, that's low. 80% homophilous, that's high. But actually, there's 80% roughly males. And so from that perspective, there's 20% females. And this person chose 40% females, hence roughly. It's not completely 20-80, but almost. Okay, so there's a difference between do they have a lot of homophilous ties, which is this, and do they have a tendency above chance of choosing people that are the same or not? A tendency towards homophily. And this is already showing that there's a difference between descriptive and sort of statistical tests, or tests where you take into account the opportunity or things like that. Because yes, just speaking, there's 80%, 40%, 60%, but statistically, maybe there's a high tendency for homophily for this person. Okay, and maybe a tendency for heterophily for this person. You know, that's 60%. Okay, so difference between the percentage, a number, and the tendency above chance. Now, the above chance is a question because, of course, what is above chance? And we can introduce a lot of different things. We'll see this later on, but we'll talk about statistical tests. Just at this point, notice the difference between these two things. There's one other measure that sometimes is used, which is sort of the odds ratio, or one popular measure, which is dividing AD by BC. Now that means that 1 is sort of the reference point, and if it's higher than 1, it's homophily, lower than 1, heterophily. But this has a bit more problems if, for example, BC is 0, so there's no B's and no C's. You divide something by 0, and that doesn't work. So this measure has sort of more difficulties, the odds ratios, than Euler's Q. If you know log linear modeling, that's basically sort of what we're doing here. Okay, good. So that's about homophily. And I think that I don't know why I have another slide like this. So let's come back to this other idea, which is, what if we take into account not whether we connect with other people that are different to ourselves, but whether these people are different from each other? And now we're going to ignore ego's value. We're actually, or category, we're going to look at the others and look at their diversity. And the idea here is really that, as with Granovetter's strength of weak ties, and as with Rombert's part of the argument, the fact that you connect with people, different types of people, gives you unique resources from each of them. So here, I'm the Smurf that has connections to someone that can, build something in my house, can bake a cake, have a doctor, which would be useful at this point. Someone that helps me with my gym, a painter, a farmer, a writer, different types of people. Each of these give me unique access to resources. Just as a different social circles with Granovetter. Here, I'm connected with the same number of people and they have resources, but they're all cooks. And that's not very useful. Generally, it's good to have 1 or 2 cooks maybe, but you know, having 6 or 7 cooks, that is 7. Maybe this is not useful. So there's not a lot of diversity here. They're all from the same social circle. Think about Britney Spears. It's Britney Spears surrounded by other singers. Not very useful if you think about it from Granovetter's perspective and Ron Bright's perspective. So how can we calculate this? Well, this is what's called the IQV index, index of qualitative variation, variation, yeah. But it has different names in different fields. So in economics, for example, it has a different name, but it's actually the same. What we're going to do is we're going to look at a person, and now we don't care what this person is. What we care about is the categories of the other people. So if this is, for example, the type of education they have, so sociologists, economists, mathematics, computer scientists, and so on, then the ideal situation is if you have, proportionally speaking, from each of these groups, equal proportions. That's the idea, yeah? So if you have equal number of mathematics, sociologists, computer scientists, psychologists, and so on. And so how can we calculate this? Well, we can take the percentage over the different groups. Now, the theoretically percentage, so in the sense that we have red, blue, yellow, and green. If there would be also purple here, for example, and this person is not connected to any purple, we still have to put purple here, because you could have chosen purple as well. Okay, so what we do is we take the person, we take what proportion is red of the alters? Well, 2 out of 7, that's 0.28. What proportion is blue? 3 out of 7, that's 0.429. What proportion is yellow? 1 out of 7, that's 0.143. What proportion is green? 1 out of 7, that's 0.143, right? And if I take the sum of that, that will be 1. Because there's unique categories and everyone is just belonging to one category, the total number of the sum of the percentages will be 100, because that's what I'm doing. I take divided by 7. So that's not what will give me the diversity. What gives me the diversity, the variation among my alters, is to take the second power of that. So I do 0.286 times 0.286, which gives me 0.081. And I do 0.42 times 0.42 and it to the second. So that's the second power that gives me this. And this to the second power and this to the second power. And I take the sum of that. Is that okay? So I take the sum of that and that gives me something. What does it give me? Well, it's difficult to explain in this way. So let's look at 2 extreme examples. Let's suppose that you have a person. So now these are 2. So this gray thing here is the real network, right? So the real ego network. But here, there's a person that's only connected with reds. And not with blue, not with yellow, not with green. So it could be 5 connections with reds or 7 connections, doesn't matter. 7 divided by 7 or 5 divided by 5. If I take the second power of that, I get 1 to the second power. 1 times 1 is 1. 0 times 0 is 0. If I take the sum of that, that gives me 1. So if I'm completely not diverse in my alter, so if I'm only connected with one group, only connected with the Smurfs that bake cake, then my diversity, my IQV index, sorry, my original second power gives me 1. Is that okay? If, on the other hand, I'm equally divided over these 4 groups, it's not possible with 7 because there are 4 categories, you can't divide equally over this. Let's say that you will have 8 connections, 2 to red, 2 to blue, 2 to yellow, 2 to green. That would give me 0.25, 0.25, 0.25, 0.25. 1 divided by the number of categories, number of colors that there are. If I take the second power of that, that gives me 0.0625. Same. If I take the sum of that, that's 0.25. It's actually 1 divided by the number of categories. So if I'm the most diverse in the sense that I equally spread my connections with all the different groups. So 2 connections to red, 2 connections to blue, 2 to yellow, 2 to green. So I have like equal, access to each of these groups. So that's the most diverse I can be. If that's the case, I get a value of 0.25. So what I have is actually, if I look at this value, I can look at this from a perspective of, okay, the least diverse would be 1. If I would be connected with all the people in the same group, 1. Most diverse, connected with different people equally, that would be 20.25. I'm actually 0.03. That's relatively close to this one. So this person is actually quite diverse in their eco networks, in their type of connections they have. Is that okay? So what I can do is actually the IQV index is actually, so Blau's IQV index is actually the opposite of that. What it does, it's first taking 1 minus, because now I have a high value if I'm not diverse. I want a high value when I'm diverse. So I do 1 minus, because I know that 1 is going to be always the highest. So 1 minus means that this becomes 0. This becomes 0.69, but this becomes 0.75. Why? Because there's a limited number of groups. It really depends on how many groups to get what's the lowest value you can have. If you would have 10 different groups, red, yellow, blue, green, gray, light gray, dark blue, light red, and so on, if you would have 10 groups, that would be 0.10, 0.10, 0.10, 0.10, 0.10. The second one would be 0.01. Some of that would be 0.10. Yeah. So as you have more groups, which is predefined, right? It's not something you define on the spot. It's predefined how many groups there are. If you have more groups, this becomes smaller. And so this becomes closer to 1. Now it's not 1, it's lower than that. So what we do is we first subtract the value from 1, and then we divide by the now maximum value, which is 1 minus 1 divided by the number of categories, number of colors. And that gives me 1. So I now have homogeneity. Diversity is called heterogeneity. Diversity is the diversity among the alters is the heterogeneity among the alters. It's not the same as heterophily. Heterophily is about me and you. Yeah, it's about ego and alters. Heterogeneity is about the diversity among the alters, not taking into account what ego is. We're not even interested in that, in principle. We're interested in the diversity among the alters. So heterogeneity is the diversity among the alters being highest. Homogeneity is when when everyone is the same. So all of your connections are the same. They're all cooks. They're all baking cake. Heterogeneity, they're all doing different things, or equal proportion of people are doing different things. Yeah. So maximum diversity or heterogeneity when equal number of alters are from each category. Minimum diversity, heterogeneity when all alters belong to one category. And in other words, homogeneity, the opposite of heterogeneity. My real value is 0.92. So that's actually, if I look at the scale from 0 to 10 or from 0 to 1, it's sort of here. Yeah. So quite heterogeneous, quite diverse. So that's basically what we can do. We can have 3 types of arguments. One is, I want to be connected with people that have a lot of resources, resourcefulness. That's the first. Second is, I want to be connected with people that are similar to myself, homophily, or I want to be connected with people that are different to myself, that challenge me, heterophily. Second. Third argument, I want to be connected with different people, different types of people. So I want to have my friendship network that basically I have one person that knows about music, one person that knows about sports, one person that knows about other stuff that's really specialist in this. So I have like a range of things. So I can do this thing with one person, this thing with another person. So it's a bit abstract in some ways here still, but we will have at some point someone talk about ego networks and migrants networks. And so that's where maybe we can find some examples for this that are more concrete. Yeah. Okay. I am going to, if you don't have any questions, then I am going to leave you for today. And as I said, I'm going to cancel for tomorrow because my throat is, I'm really struggling to speak normally. I was teaching just before and I was like moving between high pitched and low pitched, and it was a bit weird. So I'm going to cancel for tomorrow. So we're not having class tomorrow. And I'm still hoping that next week on Wednesday, everything will be fine. But that also means that for those that are not tomorrow attending class, Tuesday, there's no class either because, you know, that was normally the normal Thursday. So we'll see each other on Wednesday next week. Okay, so someone was asking about ego networks and further reading. It depends a bit what you want to do. Different things that you can do here. If you're really interested in ego networks, like, you know, I ask each of you, what are your best friends? And then tell me something about your friends. There is a good book by Borgatti. It's actually, Borgatti is not the first author. There's Barry, I have to look it up. Barry Pesco something. Yeah. There's some other books on ego networks, but so this is where person that's going to talk is a postdoc here in Trento, and she did her PhD in Manchester with people that did quite a bit of ego networks on this. Good. So she will give a talk in the next couple of weeks. I don't know, like 2 weeks or 3 weeks probably. Maybe 4 weeks. Okay, if you want more information and if you want to have more reading, just email me. I can then try to give you a bit more references. Yeah. Okay.
I have one question maybe. As the current book you have been recommending of Borgatti, which is mainly dealing with UCNet, whereas we are dealing with R, and you are about to write a book about with R. Do you have maybe for the meantime another alternative book which might serve, which is more appliant with R?
So yes, there is a few books that are there. There's one by the Polish guy Mikhail, but I forgot his last name again. I'm really bad with names. So basically, send me an email about this, yeah, and then I can Google, I can search for things. Mikhail. So from Poland, and there is another one, but yeah, anyway, for those that want to leave, go ahead, go, you know, have a good evening. If you want to talk with me more, I'm still here. And as long as my voice keeps, I can do it. So with respect to the males females thing here, so it's actually that the female here, the B, is actually very biased in a sense. She's very selective in choosing homophilous. So why is that? Because she chose 2 out of 3 people, and she only chose 3 out of 13 males. So 2 out of 3 females. So Yeah, so the bias is, so the way this is seen is that the network is, so the number of males and females is given. We're not discussing why there are more males in the organization than females. Yeah, that's sort of given, and we're not going to say, oh, but that's a problem or not. That's a different question. But that's why it could be a realistic situation in some of the top organizations, because we know that females are still underrepresented in some organizations. So, but it's given that that's the case, is there a tendency for males or females to do that? So, sorry, I'm just trying to read this at the same time. So, the conclusion is that if you say that the opportunity, we shouldn't systematically choose, or we shouldn't take into account whether someone is male or female. If that's the case, then everyone would roughly have an opportunity of 12 to 13 males and 3 to 4 females. So that would be the balance normally. So that would be unbiased if you randomly choose. Sorry, if I'm not completely clear, let me know, right? Yes. Sorry, I'm just trying to. Just trying to see. So, okay, I'll, if you want, wait, sorry, I'm just going to, Aurora, if you want, we can still talk a bit more about this, just to clarify. So I'm happy to talk about this a bit more. So then there's a question, what are the most common types of constraints influencing the opportunity to bond with? Okay, this is the question, what are the constraints? It could be very different things. So this is, it could be that we have, if we have common, for example, if we have common friends, that we're more likely to become friends. It could be the amount of time you spend there with a person, but it could also be similar characteristics. So for example, we know that in school classes, visible characteristics are important aspects for a friendship to merge. Like, you know, same gender at some age, at some other ages, it's, you know, it could be like the type of toys you like or things like that, stuff like that. So there could be a lot of different things there. Could be having common friends, because if you have common friends, it's not only that you have more amount of time of possibly spending together, but you also might have more similarity with each other. Okay, I would suggest that we, if you're okay with this, that we then follow up next week. And so tomorrow, no class in the morning. I know you're sad about it, but I will find a way of compensating for that. Okay. Okay, have a good evening. And thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Take care.